the key to that, to Paul's understanding and our understanding of that experience of conversion on the road to Damascus was this: Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Who are you? He says. You know, Saul knew he was persecuting the followers of this Jesus. But then he says, I am Jesus and you are persecuting me. The one thing that Saul knew was that he was not persecuting Jesus, even though he may have argued with him, who knows, earlier. But Jesus had already been done away with. He's not talking about in the past. Those words are referring to the present. Why are you persecuting me? And those words, I believe, form the basis of the whole teaching, the whole doctrine of the body of Christ. Don't you know that you as the church are the one body of Christ, and each one of you, individually, members of that body, joined to one another as members of our bodies are joined to ourselves. And that was the overriding concept of what it means to be church that permeates all of Paul's writings. Why are you persecuting me? Now, we have Saul and we have Paul. They're the same person. Two names. And it's at Paphos in Cyprus in Acts 13, verse 9, at the beginning of the first missionary journey, that Luke makes the change from calling him Saul, to Paul. Quotes Saul, also known as Paul. And then from there on out, he calls him Paul. The names are interesting because Saul is a Jewish name, Paul is a Roman name. Saul, of course, goes back to the first king of Israel. Those two names, even though in English they sound a little bit alike except for the first letter, are completely unrelated. Paul is not a Latin version, much less an English version, of Saul. They are two completely different names. And it was not unusual for people who were Roman citizens, people living in Rome or in Roman territories, to have multiple names. Each one having some kind of significance, each one having some kind of family history, family meaning. So it is very likely that Paul, right from the start, had the name Saul given to him for use in Jewish circles, and the name Paul for use in Roman circles. So both names are his. He didn't undergo a name change the way, for example, that Simon was renamed Peter by Jesus. Both of those names were his. And the meaning of the names, which I don't remember, I should have refreshed my memory on them, but the meaning of the names is pretty irrelevant to the person. They were simply his name. Okay, that's our first city. A little insight into Paul from that city, his home, Tarsus, Paul of Tarsus. Our next city is called Antioch. It's often identified in the Bible as Antioch, as Syrian Antioch, to distinguish it from some of the other Antiochs, like Pisidian Antioch. There were whole bunches of Antiochs in the ancient world. They were often named for or had as part of their designation something about their location. Antioch in Syria or Antioch in Pisidia. But this Antioch was also built on the river Orontes. And it's in a strikingly beautiful location there, about 20 miles or so from a beautiful harbor, a beautiful bay, which is called Seleucia Perea. Now, it was founded in 323 BC by Seleucus I, one of Alexander's generals. It became a wealthy center of trade and commerce. Under the Romans, it was the capital of the eastern part of the empire, and eastern Rome, really. A cultural and ethnic melting pot, it also had a very large Jewish population. By the way, The Jewish population at the time of Jesus and at the time of Paul in the Holy Land was probably not too much more than 1 million. And there were probably at least 5 million Jews scattered in the major cities of the Roman Empire. Antioch, Tarsus, Ephesus, Sardis, Rome, Alexandria. In the major cities, there were more Jews there than there were in the land of Palestine. Now, Antioch is where those who followed the way of Christ were first called Christians by others, probably as a sign of conflict between factions. Here's basically what happened. If you read in the Acts of the Apostles, it kind of gives us a movement from Jerusalem up to Antioch because there was a beginning of a persecution of the followers of the way, of which St. Paul was a part of that persecution. And particularly there remained a colony of Christians there in Jerusalem, but many of them used that persecution as a reason to remember what Jesus said. Go out. Don't just stay here. Go out. So they went. They kind of formed a base in Antioch. Now, the situation was interesting in Antioch because there was an interesting relationship between the Jews and the Gentiles, the non-Jews, the pagans in Antioch. There were many people who were not Jewish. They were called righteous Gentiles, who were very, very attracted by Judaism because of its moral qualities, because it was a living religion that said something to the moral character of people, unlike the Roman official religion of all the gods and goddesses, which was truly corrupt, and for anybody who had half a brain, was unbelievable, and just you couldn't do more than just give them lip service. Here was a religion that actually had substance and really, really attracted people. But they would sort of stay on the outsides of the synagogue. They were attracted to the Jewish law and teaching, but they could not fully accept the Jewish way of life. That is, circumcision, kosher food. They couldn't accept the whole package. And so they were sort of hangers-on. Interesting, they were also often fairly wealthy. And they would contribute a lot to the building and the upkeep of the synagogues for the Jews. So the Jews really appreciated them. Although the Jews would not eat with them. Why? Because you never knew when they might try to sneak in some non-kosher food, and thereby rendering the Jews unclean. So they accepted them wonderfully up to a point. Now, what happened here in Antioch? These Christians from Jerusalem came up there. Many of them, well, all of them, were Jewish Christians. Many of them were very, very conservative and said, if you want to follow Christ, you have to be fully Jewish first. And that means circumcision, that means acceptance of kosher food, that means that whole package. And others, and this particular group was being led by Paul himself, said, no, wait a minute. You can't do that. If you are a Jew, there is no reason why you should give up Judaism and Jewish practice. You shouldn't. But you cannot impose that on somebody who is seeking to follow the way of Jesus. Because Jesus, as the new law himself, is enough.